All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Open Source Committee's candidate intro interview session. This is session number 4. Today, right now, we have 3 of our candidates. We have a few more that we are expecting to join. But as of right now, we do have Johnny Kelly, Mr. John Nickel, and Lucas as well. So we'll give each of you an opportunity here. Jump in, say your hellos, and then we'll see if we get to some questions from the community or even just some questions from us here at the Open Source Office. Johnny, if you want to go ahead, I think this is probably the first session you've been in.
Yeah, I've been doing things. I was in Vienna recently and I missed a couple of things also in the technical steering committee Twitter spaces because I was traveling. But yes, hello everybody. I'm Johnny Kelly. I've put myself in as a candidate for both technical steering committee and open source committee. This is the open source committee section. A bit about me, I guess. Been in Cardano since 2021. Sort of went through the traditional Bitcoin, then Ethereum, then realized Cardano was awesome path. And then have got involved in governance back last year, SIP 1694, and then joined the governance parameters working group, got into Intersect through that, and then have joined things like the CLI API working group and the Ledger working group off the back of that. Been in a few of those meetings, including the emergency meeting about the way counting is being done for SPOs. Very much interested in being a part of discussing standards and practices and ways things will work with open source related, ledger related things in Cardano, and just getting into best practices, standards, associates, things like that. I'm a bit tired since I've just been traveling. I got back last night, so I apologize if I'm a bit low energy right now. But yeah, that's me. I'm very deeply interested in the Cardano ecosystem. I'm very interested in being a part of coming up with how things will work.
Awesome. Thank you so much there, Johnny. So we'll move to John or Lucas. Looks like John's ready.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. This is I am new to Intersect in the open source committee. I will say I've been in. My name is John Nickel, of course, a senior software engineer, has been working in the Web 2 space and in open source for about a decade. Basically, came into Cardano and knowledge of. I finally understood that Bitcoin was not going anywhere in 2021, right around the same time that I discovered Cardano. And so thankfully I skipped over a lot of the Ethereum stuff and went straight to stacking Bitcoin and ADA and CNTs. I am a co-founder of a couple projects that haven't really minted anything or done much of yet in Cardano. We're sort of biding our time. I think I stated previously that I want to be sure to be a net benefactor and contributor to the community and not an extractor of value from the Cardano community. And so I believe very strongly in open source and in the principles of open source. And there's some projects that I'm working on right now where some of the code, of course, is not open source, and we would like to have a DAO and maybe vote on that in the future. But I'm really excited about all things governance, everything that's going on with Cardano. I don't have my camera on right now. I'm actually out of town and getting ready to go to Austin here really soon to go to the workshop. Really excited to meet a lot of the guys. I've talked with people in Twitter Spaces. I have not really met or been to a Cardano event really in person yet. So really excited to meet a lot of you guys and work with you, and just honored to be a part of the process. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. And I'll give John a quick shout out because John has uniquely been to, I want to say, every session that we've held. So definitely some kudos there for you, John. Lucas, whenever you're ready.
Hey, everyone. Well, I'm going to repeat a bit what I said in previous calls, but mostly my background is, since I can remember, in IT, but took a slightly different career path than to be a full-time dev. I was mostly a technical business analyst in banking and wealth management, and yeah, bridging between the human and the technical side. I've been in Cardano since 2021, 22. I started with Gimbal Labs, helping a bit here and there with learner success, and then started doing some ideathons and applying for some funding. Eventually, I took a job as a developer experience person at Maestro, which is a data provider for apps. So that helped me connect with a number of projects, and whether from the Gimbal Lab side or from Maestro, it's been quite insightful to see how open source is a catalyst for the ecosystem. And unlike John, for example, I still consider myself much a Bitcoiner. So in that environment, open source is also quite relevant. So there's things like Nasser, for example, are things that I'm curious about. What else can I say? Why do I want to be in the open source committee? I was just actually tweeting about that, and the perspective I was sharing just now is that firstly, developing open source shouldn't be the exception, should be the norm in our ecosystem, in our environment, in our if we have decentralized technology, it should be decentralized in its production and in the contributions that we get from everyone. And then that's exactly the challenge. So the coordination that this kind of development requires. As I said, I'm not a maintainer of repos. I'm not a full-time dev, but to be able to articulate it, to facilitate the work that the committee will be doing, articulating with a number of projects, is something that I've done professionally, and it aligns a lot with my core skill set. So yeah, I think there's the side of coordinating things. There's also the side of bridging outwards and helping promote the open source mentality, or use it as a flag for Cardano in neighbor ecosystems. So I think that's what I can share for now.
Awesome. Thanks so much there, Lucas. Sebastian has joined us, and he's another one of our candidates who I believe has managed to make it to every session. So another good little kudos that way. Sebastian, if you're ready, we can get just a quick intro from you, and then we'll see if we have any questions.
Hey everybody, sorry for being late. My name is Sebastian Pavon. I'm running for a seat in the open source committee. My background, I'm part of some teams in the ecosystem, in the developer ecosystem. One of those is Gimbal Labs. The other is Mesh.js, the really useful library that is making it easy for developers to start building things on Cardano at production level and scalable dApps. And I'm a co-founder of Andamio. Andamio is a platform that is keen on the collaboration and contribution among the open source projects. And my proposal as member of the open source committee is fostering collaboration between the open source projects around within the ecosystem, and how this collaboration is necessary in this moment to start building more complex systems and start creating new ways to onboard new developers, onboard new projects, and open the gates to the world, basically. Yeah, that's me. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian. So you've brought that topic up a couple of times, and I definitely want to highlight that. Maybe that can be our first question here. So from that developer advocacy perspective, it's something that the open source office is running. And so we haven't clarified that is under OSO, not under OSC specifically. But OSC does still have the ability to give us some insight, right? or basically say, yes, it looks like asking them to do this would be moving in the right direction. So what would our candidates say in terms of developer advocacy if we were to expand on that topic just a little bit?
Yeah, I can go.
Sure.
I can go. The open source office is starting this laddered program about how to expand the efforts around contribution, around how developers and new contributors can start to being more involved in the open source projects. We know, as a general knowledge, that it's really difficult to involve new contributors and in this open source environment. I think in those, that's an example of how advocacy is tending to look for new solutions to to solve real problems in the developer ecosystem. I think if we combine that kind of efforts with new ways to collaborate among projects, we can get this sharing of resources between the projects. Advocacy is not a new thing, because I think in some way each project in the ecosystem is looking for push the envelope in promoting open source code and open source works, and it's key. It's key in the current state of the ecosystem. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I would also call some attention. I believe some of you may be familiar, or maybe you've had a chance to take a look at it, but we have had some talk in regards to a contribution letter that we're finishing up. The developer advocates have helped us out that way. We've, of course, got our project lifecycle framework, and as we move into our support services that we're looking at pushing out probably sometime next month, these developer advocates and rather the developers that they're able to reach out to are going to be a big part of that. What is the perspective here, the candidates, on how impactful that is to 2025 and the overall goal for the open source committee? Maybe that's a little bit better of a question.
I can just say that without others speaking, that it's hard for me to speak to some of this, just because being as new as I am, and really wanting to listen for a while before I really speak to some of this stuff. But it's important. So yeah.
All right.
So my understanding of the open source committee as it is right now is that it's overseeing Cardano's existing code base for things like the Cardano node, Cardano DB sync, and other elements that are a part of the overall infrastructure and architecture of the Cardano ecosystem, right? So these questions are sort of new to me, just like John, because it's talking about advocating for developing further beyond the IoT sphere or affiliates of IoT, and trying to encourage people to come in and build their own repos that are open and allow people to code in an open environment, versus what a lot of projects are doing at the moment. Like Eternal, for example, is closed source, right? But it's one of the most popular wallets on the ecosystem. So there's sort of a confusion around that, because like, why is the most popular thing not open source? So and is that something that talks negatively to open sourcing in the Cardano ecosystem? If we claim to be an open decentralized system, we are certainly with the architecture of the base chain itself, definitely, and all of the repos have been moved to Intersect control, which is a good thing because it allows for standards, practices, different branches, ideas to come up, and all of the governance-based things. But the these questions to me are a bit difficult to answer, because how do you advocate for people to open source their projects if they're not doing it already and they are already popular? So it's a challenge for the open source committee rather than an opportunity, in my opinion. And that's why I'm sort of hesitant to answer. I'm looking at the open source committee definition and the knowledge base as well, just to get a better perspective on this as well. And it's saying advise and promote open source activities across the ecosystem, be a rallying point for members to get advice on building in an open source environment. So absolutely, there's the advocacy side of things there, is to try and encourage people to open source things that weren't open sourced before. But then they're afraid of losing their popularity, their level. They might also be afraid of people criticizing their code. They might be doing something behind the scenes that people will be like, that's terribly bad. Why have you been doing that the whole time? So encouraging people to come out of their shell and encouraging people to not worry so much about how it will be perceived, and actually working together is something that I think we need to do as a group here.
All right, couple of questions. Let me actually get to Lucas just real quick, because you might have something to say on that, and then Abhik, we'll get to you here.
So in terms of advocating for open source, the first thing that comes to mind is leveraging. One thing I didn't mention in my introduction is that I'm also facilitating a group called Cardano Blockchain Infrastructure Alliance, where we have the likes of Blink Labs. They are developing a node in Go, or a Ouroboros client in Go. And I think there's a lot that we can already leverage or partner with from existing communities, and bridging with them. We're going to get different points of view that are as much or even more hardcore open source people than, if that's possible, than the open source community, more extreme in some aspects maybe. And I think we could do extensive work of like inventorying the kinds of mindsets and projects that are already being done, and mindsets that they're being done with, and turning outwards. Like you guys were just in this open source conference, and there's a lot that we can do to bridge with other whatever libraries, tools we can get Cardano listed on or included as connectors or any other kind of builder stacks, even not just on code integrations, but in terms of training plans, for example, looking for nice partners that are open source, that have an open source education mentality, and try to include Cardano tooling and Cardano development in their portfolio of courses, for example.
All right, Sebastian, did you have something on the developer advocate question there? Another response, or?
Yes, I think Abhik has the hand raised first, didn't he?
Okay.
Yeah, Abhik had the hand up.
Ah, sorry, man. Yeah.
Wow, everyone's saying my real name. No one's absolutely. Oh, thanks, Terrence. Say Tex anymore. I'm gonna say Terrence from now on. No, I'm joking. So, guys, really cool to see you all. Sebastian, John, Alex, Christian, Pedro, Laura, and Jonathan and Trex. Just want to quickly mention on what Jonathan and Pedro mentioned. If there is some gap in the knowledge, like if you guys want some information about the open source, like if there's something not clear, feel free to ask here with us, like we're here. So like don't be afraid, like, oh, like this is all new to everyone. So no one should be afraid of asking anything, right? So if you guys go, well, I don't really understand this, ask it. Just ask it. Don't even be afraid. There's judgment here, and we will try our best to like make sure that information out. And if there's a gap in our knowledge base by any chance, if you say, hey, you're missing this stuff, then let us know, because we want that feedback from you guys. Mind you, this is open source. You guys need to tell us if we are missing something, and if we are... Sorry, go I'm done.
I think something I would appreciate is some sort of rundown, and there's probably minutes available and there's probably videos available, but just at this moment, some sort of rundown about what's been going on with the open source committee as is before elections and what kind of things are being discussed and worked on so far, just so for continuity's sake that it'll continue in that realm. And I know during the annual members meeting there was a slide that was put up about like the separation between OSC and another aspect of the open source side of things, and I'd like to see that slide again in this meeting if possible, if someone has it, just to be able to get an idea of the different realms that are being worked in. But any kind of summary of what's being done already within OSC, which would then be a candidate's responsibility if they got elected to continue.
That's a great call out. I'm going to look and see if I can find that for us to review.
I think
there.
I've got
It's
a screenshot I
hot
took of it
topic.
during the meeting, but I'll see if I can share it. But if you can, that would be great.
Quick question, just oh yeah, that chart. So the why open source, we have a video on that. It's called the State of the Union. But essentially I'll just address it real fast. This is what kickstarted our open source strategy and everything in Cardano. We were asking what's the biggest problems with open source and core Cardano. Community let us know these were the issues. So the from the open source committee, being a decision-making body, they had several policies that were instituted in an open source strategy that affected these areas. And then the open source offices created these programs to complement it. And then we did a maturity pilot to assess the current maturity ranking. And that maturity grade essentially was a 60%. So we passed, but by barely a margin. So it shows that we did have impact as to what was going on, and how bad the score would have been without the committee actually taking action on stuff within the first 2 quarters. So I'll share that deck with y'all, but on the first 2 slides, it has the survey feedback results in the footer of the deck. And that's kind of the feedback that we went off of from the community. And we only chose on the open source strategy 3 pillars to attack, which was governance and decision-making, technical sustainability, and then community collaboration and communication. And that's what our strategy completely focuses on as a baseline to set up. But as y'all come in, we need to revisit the strategy and what are the next pillars that we need to focus on. That's very much going to be a decision-making piece once elected. But Tex can take any other questions. But I was actually going to ask that is, what do y'all see as the biggest problems of open source in Cardano, or the next thing that we should focus on?
Personally, out of this slide that you just shared the link to, which I'm very much appreciative of seeing the entire presentation as well. I'll look over this. Lack of community engagement. Speaking back to my previous statement about Eternal not open sourcing and other projects not doing so, and there being some contention within the community about that. How do you encourage people to stop hiding?
That's definitely a great question. I mean, the goal is to bring that to the stage. So we want to see what those thoughts are. It's a high topic of discussion when it comes to the open source committee. So I mean, it's one of those things where everything we do, we're constantly factoring that as a question: is this going to preclude or prevent somebody from wanting to participate, and how do we change that narrative? But yeah, it looks like everyone has something to say, so let's hear it. I think John was first there.
Yeah, I think that not to just jump also on what Sebastian's been saying in every single one of the times that he's been here, it's been fantastic. But I think that one of the biggest issues that we have, and I can say as somebody who's working on building some software right now, that I would want to open source probably my code in sections. So I already have plans to take a system library, a common abstraction library, which would be all interfaces, a common adapter implementation, which would be for common frameworks, probably the framework that I'm using, and then potentially a tool at a time. So like a feature at a time. If I build a music player that plays music NFTs that you happen to have in your Cardano wallet, that's something that potentially could be useful. I would open source potentially that code, that tool, the UI code, and maybe the API that uses some of that stuff by itself. And so I want to say that the problems are connected, and that the reason I'm tying to what Sebastian's saying is I think the problem is that we don't have collaboration at a project level where you see those things. You know, I have only recently started speaking with some of Shaggy Rax and his friends and the people that he knows that are also building software, and they're building tools and doing different things. And so some of the things that I didn't even know were possible. It's like you don't see the use cases. You know, somebody might be building something to just as an example, to potentially encrypt and decrypt data and use that in a smart contract, right? And so that sort of information, they might have a use case for that, and then I might see that information and not know, oh wow, I didn't even know something like this might technically be possible, because I'm sort of new in to Plutus, you know. And so I think as we come together, and so this is also not meant to be a soft shell of my project, but then again, the Liberty project was never meant to be a project that sells NFTs or makes but I've been since 2022 trying to build a project specifically for the purpose of having a Discord where other project leaders could get together and discuss things, and potentially also be an organization, maybe nonprofit in the future, to be used to open source software. So that right there, so that's why I'm actually in part of two projects. I have a project that really has some financial and memeability to it, and I have a project that's really just meant to be the open source arm of what I want to do within Cardano. And so I think I know I'm taking a lot of space here, but I just want to say that I think that what Sebastian's going is in the right direction. It's like, if you can get a room and get project leaders and these technical people in the right room together, and they start to see how much of the stuff that they're building overlaps, you're naturally going to start to have people want to work together, open source pieces, share pieces. I think having some common repos with Intersect for the Cardano stuff. And again, personally, I'm thinking about building out some repos in the PHP world, because that's sort of where I play in, and I'd like to open source some PHP libraries. So that's
I would appreciate that.
Oh yeah, that's what I want to do, that 100%. Whether I'm elected or not for this is sort of the direction that I'm heading, and I feel like we're all kind of coming together at the right time. And just because the sentiment in the asset prices are low, we don't necessarily see it. But if anything, that weeds out a lot of the riffraff. So those of us that are able to kind of get in, and I don't mean to use riffraff in a derogatory term. I mean that the serious people are in the room together now. You know, there's not so many people here that are just here for Cardano price goes up. You know, we're here for the right reasons, and I think it's good, and I'm glad to be a part of it, and I fully support what both Jonathan and Sebastian specifically are saying, and I think Sebastian's key of needing to focus on project collaboration, I think is going to be really important here in the next year. So.
Excellent. I think John has nailed it. The thing. Each project in this ecosystem has to take some business decisions, and we have to understand why and as you said, John, the usual methodology is to open the code piece by piece, step by step. For example, we as open source committee, we could go to these projects that have taken this decision of open the code, some pieces, some parts of the code. One of those is, for example, Maker. Maker, in some point a few months ago, they decided to open the Maker Studio, and usually Maker is a project fully closed source. because they have some business decisions to take. They have this approach because they have some roadmap. When some projects get to some point that when they have to take some decisions in relation to the market, in relation to some partnerships, they have this closer tendency or closer decision. But in my opinion, we have to follow the traces and start to asking these people, okay, in what point you decide to open the decision of open the code emerge? What was the reason and what was the process, and how we can start in that way? I think we can start a really insightful conversation about how we can build protocols and methodologies to start those kind of conversations. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, from my side, focusing on how to foster open source, the first thing that comes to mind is it's really to applaud what the OSC and OSO is already pipelining of paid open source, and to address what Sebastian was pointing out as the business decisions that projects need to make to become sustainable. So we need to debunk this and maybe not minimize it, and it's a real situation, a real problem or concern that they need to get to sell tickets to whatever, to use whatever they build, but to find ways of monetization that are compatible with open source, because if we take it a level down and look into how we could try to make it contagion in Cardano. If you think, like, for example, NMaker was open sourcing that bit, I'm not sure, Sebastian, if they open source the core minting engine. So if any project can now mint without paying NMaker?
Yeah, no, not yet. Usually these
That's
kind
the
of
thing.
projects open just the creation part, where
Yeah.
people don't have to they don't open the key
So-
parts, but they go step
Exactly.
by step. And
So I think what we could help foster, with all respect to NMaker, but would be if we have a minting engine that's open source in Cardano. For me, as you know, I'm not 100% in the weeds of all the options. I know you can do it with Mesh. I know you can even do it with Game Changer. I've done it in Cardano for Non-Technical People courses. But it's really puzzling to me how, with all the projects that we've had, we still don't have a simple minting engine that anyone can use. Littlefish, for example, is doing an NFT marketplace. So what I was going to say just is, where we have a lot of projects that are completely closed source, maybe we could get them in a bit more in this mentality if they really find core functionalities that are open source in the ecosystem. I have put in with my initiative 45B proposal for algorithms to rank state pools, other things like improving mesh to become more multi-data provider, which is something I worked on. Yeah, there's a number of things that we could have more as common tooling that is still being held hostage, let's say, by some providers in the ecosystem. And on the more extreme level, on the more bottom level, yeah, situations like NMaker should be really maybe curated and approached, because as far as I understand, last time I saw, they were getting $800,000 out of Catalyst, and now they're going cross-chain, and maybe we should keep a relationship with them and collect a bit more, if that's in our right or not, but at least to try to really, a bit like I said before, inventory a bit what we already have in the ecosystem that could be made open source. Yeah, it's quite interesting to do that, I think.
If I can just speak to Pedro, what you're saying there with the and I'm not familiar with the NMaker situation, so I'll just say I can't speak to that. But the idea about building a really simple free transaction only minter and why that isn't available in open source. I'm in 100% agreement with that. And I think that that just right there needs to go into whatever roadmap I'm working on if it doesn't get built before, just because it's those are the types of things that in a free market society are basically just going to even the playing field. I mean, that's going to create competition. It doesn't have to look great, it doesn't have to do a whole lot of stuff, but like we need those kind of things because you know, and I'll just say I don't know exactly the way that it works, but I've been speaking a lot with pseudoscientists. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his project, is ARP Radio, and I'm not saying this to promote anything that he's doing, but I'm just saying that he was sharing with me some code that is a transaction only SIP60 music NFT minter, and so those are the kinds of SIP68. I'm sorry. Well, actually, I think SIP60 is the music metadata standard so what he has sort of built a form that's designed specifically around that music NFT use case, but having a general purpose, you know, fungible token and non-fungible token minting platform, I think open source and service available, that just seems. I'm just sort of amazed that we don't have that as well. I'm sorry. So
it's something that I started one side project that I did 2 years ago or something, was for NFT DAO to do the functional mapping of in how many ways may you want to mint a collection of NFTs. You want different rarities. You want to customize each unit, and we were in articulation with Mesh to put that project together. And that would be like just a container that you could call with an API and say, create me a collection of this or that. So it's these kinds of projects that we could nurture, whether to get funded somewhere by Catalyst or something like that, or you know, at least help raise awareness to them.
Even if it's just to handle some hosting fees, you know what I'm saying? Because you know, you could get a DigitalOcean droplet for probably $10 a month. I mean, I know to run a Cardano node is more than that, but as far as web hosting, I mean, you could probably get some web hosting together for really cheap, as long as that could be sustained.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, driving the conversations with these business projects, focus on business, but at the same time opening the gates to open source or little and small projects that offers the same the marketplace in general, the same marketplace approach. The free market is as you guys said before, it's the way to learn all the game. It's key, that part.
Jump in, Jonathan.
Yeah, that just want to be called on. Yeah, so the thing that I'm looking at here is why open source, this presentation that was being shared, and I've been trying to find out like what has been done already, as asked earlier, in the open source committee, and I can see that there was the compilation of things to be worked on and what the strategy focus should be. So I can see here that the current focus is technical sustainability, governance and decision making, and community engagement and collaboration. Now, we've been talking about that last one mostly, I think, community engagement and collaboration, and convincing people to actually come on board with adding to the sphere of projects that are committing open source. And I can see where we were and where we are slides in slide 8 and 9, which is nice to see that IoT has dropped down from being 82% to 59% of the commits that have happened in a year, which is nice to see. So what I'm seeing is governance and decision making is a focus, and technical sustainability is a focus. So if I were to become a candidate in the committee, these are the 3 areas that we'd be working on, with a view to moving on to the other 4 later. Is that correct? Or has work already begun to to look at the other four. Next on the list for strategy: technical development and innovation, strategic alignment with goals, challenges and opportunities in open source, and additional strategic considerations. Is that further out? And are we just focusing on the core three at the moment? That's my question.
So yeah, the core three are what we focused on. The strategy on the Gitbook page, there's 5 goals that were set up. We're delivering on 4 of them. The diversification of maintainers is associated with the budget process, so that won't hit till Q1 next year. That's part of our maintainer retention program. But here's the specific strategy link. But what we're trying to do is basically enable the gates for 100 community people to come in as paid maintainers, not associated with companies per se, to support up to 50 projects, 2 maintainers per project. Core is included in that, but that the incubation program and the contribution ladder developer advocates are working on right now also gives us a risk mitigation factor, so the money's not just lost and it's not just given to anybody.
Indeed, that is a worry. They might not even contribute. Is it based on how much they actually commit or maintain, or is it based on hopeful, optimistic funding?
So we listed the retention program as a must-have, associated also with OSO budget, and then we have some nice-to-haves and then negotiable items listed in the budget. So once this election cycle ends and the new nominees come on board, we're going to have a whole review cycle with the new OSC altogether, and then get into the details of how these programs will be allocated, because it's y'all's budget to manage.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't even know what that budget is yet. We're not at the point where the budget's being worked out through info action, what the allocations are, how much funding is available.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot to still work out there. And then how much. But yeah, you might know more than me on this, though.
Well, the current OSC has a rough budget. I think it's like 3.1 million, give or take, broken into various buckets. A lot of it's project support services, education outreach, and meetings. And then the actual paid open source model ties into that. All these figures become public during Cardano Summit, and then that opens the community feedback window. So we'll also get to inform y'all on everything budget-wise, as well as the feedback integration loop. And then it goes out for vote. So all this is theoretical, nice things we're going to do, and then it just comes down to what the community approves. So.
Indeed. And we're back to this thing of things happening behind closed doors from the perspective of the community, and decisions being made and budgets being, drafted that then get released as a completed document, just like the draft constitution and just like various other things. Some people push back against that and say, hey, how come all these meetings were happening, quote unquote, behind closed doors, where people could have volunteered and asked and maybe been invited in, but still feels that sort of distance from the wider community. Yeah, so there's going to be an announcement at Cardano Summit. Then people will do what they do and complain about how did this all suddenly appear, and then a real discussion will happen, and then we'll get somewhere. Hopefully, that's good to know. And 3.1 million ADA, just to be clear, not dollars.
No, it was
that's USD.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's more ADA, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to cut off John, who wants to come in here, but I did want to answer just a couple of things that you were getting at there, Johnny. One of them is, as far as that whatever budget set aside for maintainers, or how that process works, is that it's optional where it can go quarterly, right? If somebody's not working out on a particular repo, they could theoretically switch or be moved, or they could just be removed from the program, and we bring in somebody else who has a similar level of ability.
And is it the steering committee? No, sorry. Is it the open source committee's responsibility to decide who gets allocated funding like that, or is it some other aspect?
So it is going to require some. Go ahead.
Yeah, the contribution ladder signs up the merit for who's qualified with acceptance criteria of how you move through that. So that way you have a way to prove that you deserve that kind of funding and allocation. And the projects that get funded depend on their maturity in the life cycle framework, which is approved. We just have to finalize the acceptance criteria, which I want to do with the committee. We'll have a draft of it to go through the nuance of it. And then those projects, basically how we do the allocation is completely up to the committee. I was thinking of having working groups assess projects that should be funded and have the TSC, OSC being the final say as to who gets to do what. But that way it's a stakeholder review of like 50 collective people instead of just
The more
OSC
you can,
itself.
just like with the governance parameters working group, there was a group of us that were it's focused on that specific thing, but then we had to take it to the parameters committee themselves to discuss it further and present our thoughts and findings.
Yeah.
And then it was finally decided by the parameters committee above. I get that. Yeah.
If you watch the paid open source model thing, it's a whole cycle. And the two working groups that were review things is a commercialization working groups trying to be a pinpoint for ironing out commercial adoption of Cardano associated with projects and whether they have open source libraries or not. And then there's an open source library working group we just kicked off as to define what is the sustainable layer that we're working on and the landscape for that. So all of this is open, transparent. So
yeah, I know. I'm being a little bit facetious when I say people will complain, but they will.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I just said my name is Christian Taylor, and people already started complaining. Who are you? How'd you get here? Like, yeah, the trolls will always be there.
Just to speak
Go
to
ahead.
that, actually, there with what you were saying, Jonathan. This is it seems to me like there's. I mean, we're all blockchain people. There's a solution to this. It's not really actually all that difficult, but. In the PHP or the traditional world, we called it event sourcing, and it's really pretty simple. I mean, anytime you have a document or something that we're carrying forward, we should be recording a transaction. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be on the blockchain. It could be in a database, but I think that it makes sense for us to have, I don't know if it needs to be a part of the Intersect website. I'd be glad, I don't have a job right now, but I'd be glad to help out. But but it makes sense to have probably some immutable record where we can keep an audit log of either, I don't know if it would necessarily be the minutes, but it would be probably whatever document or budget that you're looking to create. I think that should probably be something that if different people are talking about it's moving from committee to committee, it would make sense for that to be a record that evolves and changes over time. Its current state is transient. It does not matter what it currently looks like. I mean, you can always pull up what it currently looks like, but what you need to be recording is every single state change that happens in that record. And then so those people that will complain at the end, you can go back and say, take a look. This is everything that ever happened. This is everybody who ever said anything about it. This is any, and so that is how we have transparency. It's you make it transparent. So if I'm all for us eating our own dog food, and just to say that, like, if we're not doing that, that would be a really cool and easy thing to do, would be for us to make those documents some form of immutable audit log.
Yep. And our stakeholder with all of this too is the budget committee itself, as well as the community abroad. So we have to justify to the budget committee where the money went and spend, basically, kind of like they're the finance department for all of this, for lack of a better word. So,
and
yeah,
that makes sense.
I used to do service charge reconciliation for commercial and residential properties for like the community area maintenance, and you have to justify your budgets and refine them year on year and do balancing charges or credits depending on what happens. So it seems like relatively standard stuff. Yeah.
I think you're on mute, Sebastian.
Sorry, I'm just curious, where can I find more information about this contributors selection process, how they will be assigning, how they will be selecting, all this stuff?
So Alex Sarragan is working on the final draft of it, but the idea behind the contribution or merit selection piece is based on this deck. There's a YouTube thing for it. So contribution ladder is nothing new to an open source piece. I just wanted to tie in a standard framework for how we could quantify merit in a Cardano defined way with community feedback. And that way, I think slide 6 kind of shows you the journey for how you go up to being a core maintainer. Obviously, if you originate the project, you get that by default, quote unquote. But it's how new users can come in, because right now, my personal thing, if I can get someone in the community to join Ouroboros network and actually enjoy that as a passion project, that's a win, because that's a niche of a niche. So that's kind of my little pet project at the moment.
Is there any way we can tie private key credentials or NFTs to people's progression through the ladder, so you can quickly look up some standardized process to see where someone is in?
That's definitely where we want to go with it.
That's awesome.
And the project maturity side's the other KYC on that. And the chart at the very bottom is what we came up with. And if y'all ever met Solona, she came up with a framework similar to what other foundations do and helped us solidify that through the previous OSC. So we just got to get the criteria specific for what mandates what level you're at. And the incubation process, we're leaving it as an optional thing, but the idea behind it was you got funding in Catalyst for an MVP, so what's next? Rather than resubmitting for funding Catalyst, you could incubate with Intersect as an option. And then once you get past into the growth and maturity phase, that's where you qualify for funding for maintenance and stuff. But that way, the theory crafting in the incubation phase, you get a little bit more mature past that, and now you have some sustainability measures going into it. So all the framework is there. We just need to get the
metrics, in my opinion, sir. So if we can get metrics on chain and get actual records and provability on things, that's very happy for me.
Yeah. Well, and the other way we are monitoring all of this is with the Baturgia folks, which is this program. Should be open to be viewed, but that chart that you saw, that's where this comes from. So they're Diane Mueller's on the OSC. She comes from Red Hat, 30 years experience. So she's a big SME in this whole space. So,
Red Hat would be controversial to some people, but yes.
Yeah. That's why we got people from several different spaces. I do have an expert council where we do have people from Apache, Linux, Diane, Red Hat, Hyperledger. So people we can pull from if we need them. Sorry to derail this from Mutex.
Sorry. I mean, at least we're talking open source realm.
No, this is going really well. Obviously, I don't have any hate towards the conversation whatsoever. That's realistically the goal, especially in these types of sessions. Since we are nearing the end, though, I did want to call out, since we've had a couple of visitors or observers throughout the time, if they had any questions, want to make sure that maybe we can get a quick format answer to them if they have any. So.
I'm just making sure to click all these links and read things. So, I've already
all
got
right.
it. So don't close the thing until I
keep the YouTube open, and the Gitbook page has everything, but I recommend the YouTube because it's all the explainer videos.
Yeah.
And then the resources are in the Gitbook.
Oh, I'm playing one. Stop. Okay. And then the SIP 60, that's fine.
I just have one curiosity. Jonathan, is that a Welsh accent or is it Irish?
No, I'm Northern Irish. I'm from Bangor, Northern Ireland, which is about 13 miles east of Belfast. So I'm over here in a little seaside town, talking smack about the community.
Sounds friendly. I love the accent. Cheers.
All right. Well, unless anyone wants to stick around, we are coming out to the close. So I would remind everyone that we do have one final session. It is going to be on Thursday, and I believe that one is a little early. I say early for me, but that's noon UTC. And so that'll be the last session that we have for our OSC candidates. And I'd love to have a discussion there. For any who have not had the full chance to kind of take a bath in everything that we're pushing out there for open source, let us know if there's something missing, and we'll get it out there for you. I know that's only 2 days, but we can be pretty quick on that release. But yeah, take a look around, see what questions you might have that we can clarify, or rather, if it gives you a question, bring that back and let us know what you would change if you're elected to the committee, right? Or how you would steer that just a little bit differently. That's definitely the point of these sessions here. But
yeah, if y'all have any questions, me and Tex are here to field them. So just let us know. I'm that open source guy on Discord. He's Texo. So
Cool. Thank you for giving me so many resources. I will be better prepared for the next one, hopefully. I've been distracted by traveling and going to the constitutional workshop in Vienna and Edinburgh. So I've got more time to look at things now.
No shame in it. I started that way 4 years ago. So,
Well, thank you, everyone. Special thank you to our candidates, especially those that have been here every time. And we will see you all on Thursday, hopefully.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. You were amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Tax. See ya. Bye.
there you go.